Nerd Night, Hidden Planets.
So I'm going to talk to you today about a lot of different hidden planets, and there's one that I wanted to address first because I get a lot of questions about it, and that's Nibiru. So has anybody heard about this supposed hidden planet? Okay, so for those of you who haven't heard of it, it's basically this doomsday planet that's going to come from the outer solar system, park right next to the Earth, and kill us all. So there are a lot of different predictions, since a lot of people, a lot of separate people have talked about this planet. So I'll highlight a few of the common threads between Nibiru. So one common claim is that when Nibiru comes and parks next to the Earth, it's going to cause the Earth to stop spinning. So one side's going to be in permanent night, one side's going to be in permanent day. That would be really bad. People also say that when Nibiru comes by, it's going to cause the magnetic poles of the Earth to flip, and the magnetic field of the Earth is very important. It protects us from solar radiation, so that would also be bad. People also say a lot that it's going to cause nuclear war, but I think my favorite prediction from when this cropped up in the news in 2012 was that if Nibiru came, Obama was going to be reelected for a third term, so I'm not sure how this planet controls elections, but it apparently has that power. So one question I get a lot from people, not just in this context, is, Larissa, are we all going to die? Is there something that's going to come and kill us all? And the answer is yes, obviously you're all going to die. I'm sorry, I can't fix that for you, but Nibiru is definitely not going to be the reason that you die. So I just wanted to talk about the science behind a couple of these really big claims, just to kind of debunk this planet. And so one of the claims is that this planet's going to have a really weird orbit, come from the outer solar system, park right next to the Earth, that actually would be really, really hard. So Jupiter is the second most massive thing in our solar system, other than the sun. And so Jupiter is really good at kind of kicking out objects that have these weird orbits. So it would this kind of object would be very unstable. It'd be very likely that Jupiter would just kick it out, and we wouldn't see this planet at all. Yes, this is very true. As far as the magnetic pole claim, even if Nibiru showed up and was right next to the Earth, there's no way that it's going to cause our magnetic poles to flip. That has to do with things that are happening inside the Earth. Nibiru wouldn't affect that at all. Also, so the claim is that we can't see Nibiru right now because it's in the outer solar system, super far away, super hard to see. So for it to come from the outer solar system, very far away, right next to the Earth in the matter of a few years, this object would have to be moving very, very fast. And in fact, it'd be moving so fast, it'd be really hard for any of the forces in the solar system to stop it right next to the Earth. And in fact, the planet would actually probably fly right out past the solar system, not even bother us at all. And my favorite bit of kind of evidence debunking this planet is you could see it with your own eyes. This planet is supposed to be the size of the Earth. If it was right next to us, you would just be able to go out, look in the sky, and see it for yourselves. Now, some people have claimed that they've already seen it, so that is what this picture is right here. And basically, all of these sightings of Nibiru have been shown to be just lens flares, so this is coming from the sun. So Nibiru is not supported by science. But this concept of having hidden planets does have a lot of scientific precedent. And I'm going to talk to you about a lot of different planets, but kind of the common theme between all of them is that if you see an object that you know exists that has a weird orbit that you can't quite explain, that could imply that there is a hidden planet kind of pushing on that object, causing it to have this weird, previously unexplained orbit. And I highlight implies here because that's not the only explanation. This is just one explanation. So you can't say for sure that there's definitively a planet there just because you see this weirdness. So I mentioned a weird orbit. I should probably define what a normal orbit is for you guys. So basically an orbit is just when you have a big thing in space, here we have a star, and you have a little thing moving around it in a circular path like the Earth, or more generally in an ellipse shape. So that's what you see in this GIF here. This object is just moving around, the big object. And the reason it's moving around is because there is a gravitational force from the big object acting on the little object that causes it to move in this particular shape. Now, the thing that's important to know about this is these orbits are kind of defined by pretty basic physics. They're defined by Newton's laws of gravity, Kepler's laws, which describe how orbits work. So these are things that are pretty easy to explain and calculate with math. So we can very easily, if we know an orbit, figure out where a planet should be at a particular time. Now, where this gets complicated is if we have more than one planet. So the previous one I showed you just had one planet. But if we have more than one planet and they're massive enough and they're close enough together, then the gravity between the two of them can cause them to pull each other a little bit out of their orbits. So in this example, I have this inner kind of blue planet and this outer, it's supposed to be purple. They probably don't look that different to you, but this outer planet. And as this inner planet is moving through its orbit, here at point A, when it's getting close to the outer planet, this planet is pulling it in the direction of this arrow, which causes it to be a little bit further away from its orbit than you would expect. Same thing happens here as it's passing by the other planet again, except it's pulled backwards. So this means if you were observing this object and you knew what its orbit should be, this gray line, you could measure its position and see that it was slightly off of where you expected it to be. So even if you didn't see this outer planet, you could see the effects it's having on the inner planet. And so this is actually the exact method that was used to discover Neptune. So people had been looking at Uranus, that had been the most recently discovered planet, and they were observing it over long periods of time, and people kept noticing that it wasn't where they thought it should be in the sky. So there are two different mathematicians. There's Adams and Leverrier, and both of these mathematicians independently came up with the idea that maybe a planet was causing the weirdness in Uranus's orbit, and used math to calculate two positions each for where they thought this hidden planet should be. And Leverrier, in particular, talked to an astronomer friend and said, hey, this is where I think this new planet should be. You should go look there. And a few days later, that astronomer discovered Neptune right here. So you can see this is very close to his prediction and also pretty close to Adam's prediction as well. So this was very exciting. This is how we discovered Neptune, a brand new planet, but it was also seen as a huge success for kind of science and mathematics that we were able to discover a planet just from using these equations. So after having a lot of success discovering Neptune, Leverrier decided, well, why don't I try this again to fix more problems? Because there is also a problem with Mercury's orbit. So what I'm showing you in this GIF here is kind of like a starting point for Mercury's orbit. And what you can see is over time, the orbit starts to shift away from its original orbit. That's called precession. And so at the time, people didn't have an explanation for why Mercury's orbit would be doing this. So Leverrier, doing the same thing again, said, oh, well, it must be another planet. That's how I fixed my other problem, so it's got to work again. So he gave this new planet a name. And for all you Star Trek fans, this is Vulcan. It's called Vulcan because it's supposed to be very close to the sun. So this is Mercury's orbit, and you can see here, this is Vulcan's orbit. So according to his calculations, this planet could completely explain the precession of Mercury's orbit. Now, what you're probably wondering is, I haven't heard of a Vulcan planet. Where is it? And the answer is people actually looked really hard for this planet because they wanted to kind of have this same prestige that happened when people discovered Neptune. The problem is when you're looking for things really close to the sun is really bright. So it's really hard to find these tiny planets. So people at the time had kind of two different options. One was to look for the planet to cross in front of the sun. That would cause a little black spot on the sun as it passed in front of it. The other way was to wait for a solar eclipse where the sun is completely blacked out, and then you can look for a little planet around the edge that you wouldn't normally be able to see. So Lots of people said that they actually saw this planet. In fact, one of the directors of the Detroit Observatory here in Ann Arbor said that during a solar eclipse, he actually saw 2 planets. Someone else said they saw the same 2 planets, so the count went up to there was 4 planets instead of just 1 Vulcan. But it turns out, like, kind of all of these observations were met with a lot of skepticism, and they were all kind of debunked. They were either shown to be sunspots, which are black spots on the surface of the sun itself, or just a background star that they were seeing during an eclipse, not an actual planet. So if there is no Vulcan, why is Mercury's orbit so weird then? Well, it turns out that instead Einstein came to save the day. So with general relativity, in case you don't know, you can have curves in space-time where you have massive objects. So the sun is massive enough that there's a little dip around it. And Mercury is orbiting so close to the sun that it is actually kind of within this dip, and that's what's causing the precession. So once you include equations from general relativity, Mercury's orbit is perfectly explained. You don't need any Vulcan at all. So I want to go back to Uranus now for our last historical hidden planet, because it turns out even after people discovered Neptune, it still seemed like Uranus's orbit was a little bit off. It still wasn't exactly where people thought it should be. So there was an astronomer by the name of Percival Lowell, and he kind of dedicated the last bit of his career to looking for a new planet that could explain that last bit of weirdness in Uranus's orbit. He called this planet Planet X, which you've probably heard a lot before. And the reason that he was looking for this planet is kind of interesting, because earlier in his career, he had studied Mars a lot. And in particular, he had founded Lowell Observatory just to study the surface of Mars. And he claimed that when he was looking at the surface, he could see these straight features. And if you've heard about the canals on Mars, these are what he claimed he was seeing. And he proposed that these could have been created by intelligent life that was living on Mars. So that turned out to be not true. And in fact, if you look at pictures of Mars today, you don't see any of this kind of straight line structure. So this kind of made him a laughingstock in the astronomical community. So he was really looking for a way to gain respect again, and this is why he kind of dedicated the last bit of his life to searching for this planet X. And in fact, he looked at hundreds of pictures with a magnifying glass, doing everything he could to try and find this planet. And unfortunately, he died in 1916 of a stroke, and his friends said that his search for Planet X had virtually killed him. So that was very sad. But the story has a happy ending. So after he died, Percival's wife really wanted someone to keep looking for Planet X to kind of prove that her husband had been right about this hidden planet. So a student by the name of Clyde Tombaugh started working at Lowell Observatory. He took up the search. And the way that he searched for the planet, he used a device called a blink comparator. And this is actually kind of similar to the way we look for new solar system objects now. So the way the device works is you take 2 pictures of the sky, same part of the sky, at 2 different times, and then you blink back and forth between them, and what you're looking for are these little dots that move across the sky. Because while stars are really far away, their position doesn't change. Solar system objects are close enough that we can see them move over time. So does anybody see what they think is Planet X in this image? No, unfortunately, that's a really bright one. That one might be an asteroid. I think this one is actually probably going to be hard for anybody but the people in front to see. Oops, sorry, there's one right here. And that's what he found. And as you might guess from the title, this ended up being named Pluto. So this was kind of the very first trans-Neptunian object discovery. So the name Pluto is actually kind of interesting. There are a lot of suggestions, but they ended up picking Pluto because it has PL at the beginning, and that's Percival Lowell's initials. And so it's a nice way to kind of remember that he started this search. And in fact, every planet has a symbol associated with it. So for example, Earth is a circle with a cross through it. And so the symbol for Pluto is, again, PL for Percival Lowell's initials. So there's only one downside. It turns out that Pluto is not planet X. For it to actually be affecting Uranus's orbit, it would have to be a massive gas giant planet. What I'm showing here in this image are all of the gas giants in our solar system, so Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto is here at the end. And you can see that one of these things is not like the others. So this is, even at the time, people started to realize that Pluto was very small, and there's no way that it was massive enough to be causing these perturbations in Uranus's orbit. So Pluto was actually not planet X. So if Pluto's not planet X, where is planet X, and why is Uranus's orbit so messed up? Well, it turns out it's actually kind of not messed up. So when Voyager 2 was heading out to the outer solar system, it took some observations of Neptune to get the best measurement of its mass at the time. And when they got a measurement of its mass, they found it was more massive than we had previously thought. And with that new mass, it actually perfectly explained the weirdness of Uranus's orbit. We actually didn't need a planet X at all. So it's kind of just like a nice outcome that we found Pluto through this search. So at this point, Mercury's orbit is fine. We didn't need Vulcan. It was just general relativity. Uranus's orbit is fine. We just needed Neptune. We just found Pluto along the way. So that means we've solved everything in the solar system. We understand it completely. I don't need a job anymore. But that's not true, and if you've been following popular science articles at all, you've definitely heard of Planet 9. So this is kind of the hidden planet of our era. It's causing a big stir in kind of the solar system community, and this object is a little bit different than the previous ones. Instead of there being one known object with a weird orbit, there are a bunch of them. So what I'm showing here in the purple and green, these are the orbits of trans-Neptunian objects, so they orbit past Neptune. Neptune is in red, and you can see they're all kind of aligned. And this is weird because you would expect, all things being equal, that these orbits would kind of fill in this circle. So people kind of didn't have a good way to explain why this clustering is happening. So in 2016, there were two astronomers that said, hey, if we had another new planet that is like 5 times the mass of the Earth, so this is what it would look like compared to the solar system, and was really far away, which is why we haven't seen it yet, that could be like pushing these orbits and aligning them together. So this is why they've proposed Planet 9. I will say it's a huge debate in the solar system community. Some people feel very strongly it exists. Some people think that this is just an observational effect, that we're only seeing these things clustered because we only looked in those areas. So the jury's still out on whether Planet 9 exists. I'm going to skip through these two. But I will say the one way that we can definitively determine if Planet 9 exists would be to find it. And this is actually something that you guys can do. There's a citizen science project. I'm not associated with it, but there's a citizen science project called Backyard Worlds. And if you go there, you can kind of do what Clyde Tombaugh did and look for these objects that are blinking across images, and you might be the person to discover the new hidden planet, Planet 9. So I'll leave this up in case anybody wants to write down the link.
This program was recorded on July 18th, 2019 at Live, 102 South 1st Street,